The train tunnel echoed with the sound of frantic footsteps, frightened shouts, and heavy breathing as three teenage boys ran for their lives. They glanced over their shoulders as they ran, searching for signs of an unseen monster gaining on them. They couldn't see much, only the distant glow of two bright red eyes. They knew that if it caught up to them, there would be no escape. As he felt the ache in his feet, the pounding in his heart, and the adrenaline coursing through his veins, Tommy couldn't help but think, why was this happening to him and all his friends? All they had done was play a game. It all began earlier that afternoon. Tommy and his two best friends, Dylan and Noah, were doing what they always did on Saturday afternoons. They're playing Roblox online. Together, the friends had played Bed Wars, Sonic Speed Simulator, Blox Fruits, Shindo Life, and more. If it looked cool and it was available on Roblox, it was pretty much a guarantee that they had played it. But they were starting to get a little bit bored of the same old thing over and over again. They weren't little kids anymore. They wanted something different. So when Tommy stumbled upon a game called Thomas.EXE, he was quick to point it out. At first, Dylan and Noah didn't want to try playing it. With the friendly picture of a cartoon train, it looked like it was for babies. But Tommy reminded them that they'd all loved Thomas the Tank Engine when they were kids, and suggested they just try it. After a little arguing, his friends agreed, and they all fired up the game. To begin with, it was kind of boring. Their characters were all walking down a train track that ran through a sunny field. The track seemed to go on forever, with no destination in sight. They kept walking and walking until Noah said he was bored and asked if they could play something else. Tommy was about to agree until a pop-up appeared on his screen. "Hello, Tommy," the pop-up said in dripping red letters. "Would you like to see the real game?" Below the text, there was an option to click one of two buttons. But instead of saying yes or no, both buttons just said yes. Whoa, that was weird. How did it know his name? Tommy asked his friends if they saw the pop-up too, and they admitted getting the same pop-ups on their screens, each with their own names. Tommy, feeling unnerved already but not wanting to seem like a coward in front of his friends, suggested they continue on and see what happens from there. They all agreed, and on the count of three, they each clicked a yes button. The screen immediately went black. At first, Tommy was worried he'd accidentally downloaded some kind of computer virus. His mom would be so mad if he broke his computer. But then the screen lit up again. The landscape of the game was completely different. There was no more sunny field, no more green grass or blue sky. Instead, it was nighttime in the game now. A vast black sky dotted with eerie red stars. The train track didn't stretch off into the distance forever anymore, but was leading toward the mouth of a huge dark tunnel. Now things were getting interesting. Maybe this game wasn't for babies after all. Tommy and his friends walked their characters down into the tunnel, excited to see what kind of action was waiting inside. Maybe there would be animatronic animals jumping out at the player, like in Five Nights at Freddy's. The only way to find out was to keep exploring. As Tommy, Noah, and Dylan followed the tracks deeper into the tunnel, Tommy could see two tiny pinpricks of red light in the darkness. Whatever they were, they looked like they were pretty far away. He directed his friends' attention toward the lights, and they steered their characters toward them. Just at that moment, Tommy took another look at his character. That was weird. When he logged in, he could have sworn his character had been wearing a purple shirt. Now he was wearing a green shirt, just like the shirt Tommy was wearing in real life. But that was impossible. He must have imagined it. But now that he was noticing their characters, Noah and Dylan's had changed clothes too. Maybe it was some kind of glitch. It wasn't like the game really could know what he was wearing. As the three boys walked deeper into the tunnel using their keyboards to test different commands to make their characters run, jump, and look around, strange, unsettling music began to play through the speakers. It sounded like a twinkly, out-of-tune music box accompanied by a train whistle, pitched way, way down. It was muffled too, like it was playing through old, busted speakers, instead of the brand new ones Tommy had gotten for his birthday. He wasn't sure why, but the hairs on his arms were starting to stand up. He shivered a little bit as a chill ran down his spine. This game was actually getting pretty creepy. Not that it was too scary for him. He wasn't some silly little kid who'd get freaked out by a computer game, especially not in front of his friends. Those red lights were starting to get bigger. They must be getting closer to whatever it was. As they got closer, Tommy's sense of dread grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly, he really didn't want to see whatever was behind those lights. He stopped, taking his hands off the computer. Noah and Dylan asked what he was doing, telling him to keep playing, but he couldn't move. He was staring fixated at those two red lights on the screen. Even though he and his friends had stopped moving, Tommy could see the lights getting bigger and bigger. Whatever was behind them, it was coming toward them. Tommy snapped out of his trance when Noah yelled at him to pick up an item laying on the track near his character. It was a flashlight. He clicked a button to pick it up, then clicked the same button to turn it on. When the light flickered on and illuminated the tunnel, he suddenly wished it hadn't. He now could see what was up ahead, what was now right in front of him. It looked like Thomas the Tank Engine, but something was wrong. The train looked rusted and worn down, like it had been left out in the elements for too long. The face was not the round, friendly cartoon Tommy recognized, but a hyper-realistic face with a wide, toothy grin that had absolutely no joy behind it. There were dark circles underneath its eyes, and the eyes themselves, they were glowing red and leaking some kind of red liquid from them that was dripping down the train's face. Tommy said with a shaking voice that he didn't think they should play this game anymore. Noah and Dylan agreed. As Tommy prepared to exit out of the game, however, the terrifying tank engine lunged forward until its face filled up the screen, its eyes staring out through the monitor and seeming to lock onto Tommy himself. He could have sworn that Thomas was looking right at him, for real. Tommy couldn't help it. He screamed. Suddenly, he heard knocking on his bedroom door. It was his mom telling him that he needed to stop spending all day on the computer. She wanted him to log off and go get some fresh air outside. For once, Tommy was more than happy to listen to her. He told his friends to meet him at their favorite hangout spot, and he clicked a button to exit the game. As he did, another text box popped up on the screen. It said, "You're making a mistake, Tommy. You can't stop the game. Only I can do that." Tommy ignored it. It was just a game. He couldn't do anything to him. He shut down his computer and left to go meet Dylan and Noah. Tommy found Dylan and Noah at the spot they'd been going to since they were in elementary school. It was an abandoned railway yard near their neighborhood. Not dangerous anymore since trains stopped running through the town, but still pretty cool for exploring and for talking about things they didn't want their parents to hear about, like in this case, the frightening experience of playing Thomas.EXE. "What was that?" Tommy asked. "The game started being weird, right?" "It's probably a glitch," Noah suggested. "Or the game was a prank, made to mess with people," Dylan added. "Yeah, probably. You want to go check out the graffiti on the tunnel?" Tommy pointed toward one of their favorite areas to explore. There was an empty old tunnel that local kids decorated with all kinds of spray paint art, usually of video game characters or their own names. The rumor at school was someone had recently added a huge mural of the characters from Mario Kart, and Tommy had been waiting for a chance to check it out in person. The boys raced over to check out the spray-painted renderings of Mario and Luigi and Toad and Peach, and quickly forgot all about their frightening experience with Thomas.EXE. They had more important things to focus on. Suddenly, the boys couldn't make out the mural as well anymore. Took them a second to notice why, but for some reason the light had suddenly faded, and it had gotten dark outside. They looked at each other in confusion, checking the time on their phones. Noah shuddered, asking why it somehow had gotten so dark so early. Dylan shrugged, trying to keep a brave face, and suggested maybe it was a solar eclipse. Tommy shook his head. He suddenly had a very bad feeling. He looked up at the sky and his stomach dropped. He could see the stars, which was already weird enough for the middle of the afternoon, but there was something else. The stars were all red, just like they'd been in the game. He looked down at his shirt, his green shirt, which had matched his in-game avatar. He quickly turned his gaze to Dylan and Noah, whose shirts also matched those of their game characters. This was all feeling a little bit too familiar for Tommy's comfort. Still, he was seized by a morbid curiosity, and he knew that he needed to look inside the tunnel. Slowly, he walked around the side of the tunnel until he was looking into the gaping void within. Noah and Dylan followed him, trying to see what he was doing. He could barely hear a word they said as he started squinting into that pitch-black tunnel. "Tommy," he heard Noah say, "there's something on the ground, by your foot." He could hear the fear in Noah's voice. When he looked down, he understood why. It was a flashlight, in the same exact place that it had been in the game just a little while earlier. The sudden darkness, the stars, the flashlight, it was as if the game had somehow followed them outside into the real world. He remembered the pop-up he had gotten before he shut down his computer and shuddered. Could it be possible? He had to know. He reached down and picked up the flashlight. Dylan grabbed Tommy's arm, desperately trying to stop him, but it was already too late. With a shaking hand, Tommy raised the flashlight and flipped the switch, sending a beam of light into the tunnel ahead. There was nothing there. Tommy let out a sigh of relief and started to switch the flashlight off when Noah suddenly screamed. Noah was pointing at the ceiling of the tunnel. When Tommy looked up, he saw those horrible red eyes glaring down at him from where Thomas was hanging, upside down. He shouldn't have been able to do that, but somehow the train was defying gravity. Then all at once, with a massive crash, Thomas fell down from the top of the tunnel, landing on the ground. There was a cloud of dust, and the ground shook with the impact. But when the dust cleared, Thomas.EXE was still there in the tunnel without so much as a scratch. He opened his mouth, sharp teeth glinting in the light of the flashlight. "I told you, Tommy," the train spoke in a voice that sounded like creaking metal. "You don't get to stop the game. I do. And we're not done playing yet." Though he'd been frozen in fear for several minutes, Tommy found his voice and screamed for them all to run. He turned and grabbed Noah and Dylan, dragging them along with him as they ran in the opposite direction. They just had to stay away from the tunnel. Surely Thomas.EXE couldn't follow them out of the tunnel, but they could hear the train rumbling along behind them as he pursued them. "The tracks! We have to get away from the tracks!" Tommy yelled, running off to the side and away from the rows of train tracks. If they stayed away from the tracks, Thomas.EXE couldn't get them. But as he veered off away from the tracks, Tommy suddenly collided with something hard and fell back onto the ground. He opened his eyes, seeing stars. No way. He was in a tunnel. He, Noah, and Dylan were all suddenly inside of Thomas's tunnel. Wait a second. Where's Dylan? Tommy and Noah looked around, but neither of them could see him. The only sign of him was a single sneaker lying on the ground behind them. Yum, yum, yum. Dylan was delicious, but I've got room for more. Thomas roared, suddenly careening toward the two boys from the shadows. He wasn't on the train tracks anymore. He was crawling around the walls on metallic spider legs. The two surviving teens ran as fast as they could. This was impossible. Had their terror and their imaginations drawn Thomas.EXE out of the game and into real life? Or had he always been there and simply used the game as a method of secretly influencing their minds? The reason didn't matter to them, though. All that mattered to them was being able to escape the tunnel and avoid the same horrible fate as Dylan. But it didn't seem like Noah had any such luck. Thomas.EXE opened his mouth, making a noise like a rusty drawbridge and exposing a huge mouthful of teeth that looked like shards of broken glass. Out from his mouth stretched a long black tongue, covered in more of those same glowing red eyes. Moving at speeds that seemed impossible for something so large, the tongue wrapped around Noah's body, pulling him up into the air, kicking and screaming. Tommy knew he couldn't save his friend, and he didn't want to look as he heard the horrible crunching noises behind him. It was safe to say that his second friend was now done for, and Thomas.EXE was coming after him now. As much as Tommy wanted to escape, it was almost like he was running in a dream. No matter how much he struggled and strained, he didn't seem to make any progress. It was just like in the game, where the tunnel extended on forever. But before Tommy knew it, he crashed into a wall. The way out of the tunnel had disappeared, and now he felt hot breath on his neck. Shivering with terror, Tommy turned to see the grinning face of Thomas.EXE standing right in front of him, licking his lips.
Game over, Tommy.